Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today. I was asked to talk about this because I talk about it a lot in our cohort. So, writing a family cookbook, the book on the left of the screen, Sharing, that cookbook was created because my son kept asking for family recipes. He and his wife had started their household, and he just wanted to recreate some of his memories. The second cookbook, Playing in the Kitchen, was just printed, and that is really more about my food journey since my son left home. Now, just to give you some context, he's 33, so he's been gone for a while. Why don't we go ahead and move to the next slide? So that is me, and you already heard about who I am and what I do. I will say that that picture is of me with my two grandchildren. Hank is 2, Lena is 5. This picture was taken last year in Asheville, very close to the Biltmore. So today it might actually be underwater, sadly. But yeah, so that is me. The reason oops, that's okay. We can no, the stumbled upon completely by accident was that I was an English lit major, so I am in fact a frustrated writer. Um, and in 1979, when I graduated, there was no way that I wanted to go back to school, and the New Yorker kept rejecting my short stories. So I became a secretary in a bank because my only marketable skill was that I could type. Okay, now we can move on. Thank you. So this is kind of why I do food. Food to me is magic. You take bits and bobs of things, you throw them into a pot, and voila, you have something delicious that will warm your soul and fill you up. I don't think that there is anything else on earth quite like it. I know that many people have different relationships with food, but I really came to this project with that in mind, that I wanted to make sure that the people who had access to these recipes and the stories behind them could evoke those feelings and those memories. The first cookbook, when I visit my granddaughter, she currently lives in Durham, North Carolina, with my son and his wife and her little brother, 2 dogs. I go out there probably 4 times a year, and she gets to pick a recipe out of the cookbook. And 90% of the time it is key lime pie, which I think is pretty amazing. She loves key lime pie. So we can move to the next slide, please. So why we do this? I said that my son asked for recipes, the family recipes that he had while he was growing up, prepared by all of his grandmothers and us in our home. So part of the reason to do this was so that it could be practically used. The second reason, and that's my mom, she was 87. We were celebrating her 87th birthday when that photo was taken, was that the older generation started passing away, and we were losing a lot of their techniques and their recipes and how they came up with the food that they make for celebrations and things like that. And I am, for better or worse, the family historian. So I decided to blend the two. Not only would there be recipes, but there would be stories about those recipes so that we could honor our families and to remember the sort of the people, the places, the events, the tastes that we had when we had this food. So the other picture, that's me. I am sitting on a porch in Zanzibar, learning how to make this fabulous dish called mandazi. It's fried dough. I love all manner of fried dough. Donuts, churros, mandazi. And, to remember that experience when I'm no longer making mandazi will be really important, I think, to me, to be able to talk about it with my grandchildren and to help others make it later on. Okay, we can move to the next one. Okay, so the other reason is to sort of create order out of chaos. I don't actually have a breakfast room anymore. I have a library. And I will say that even though I did write these cookbooks, my breakfast looks kind of like that, but all of the recipes are at least in one place now. I don't have to remember where they were. So that's the practical aspect of it. I have close to 1,000 cookbooks. You're just seeing one of the bookshelves there. Okay, so I've already talked a little bit about this, connecting the past, the present, and the future through food. But that handwritten recipe was from my mother-in-law. It's key lime pie. She created this little ringed binder for my husband when he started law school in 1976. And this is sort of, I think, the first volume truly of our family cookbook. It is quite well loved, as you can see. The present, this is me and my granddaughter making the graham cracker crust for the key lime pie. And the future, hopefully my grandson will want to make it as well. So I think that it is, I don't want to lose the stories that go with the food, because I think a lot of us have those. Well, why did we do that? And why did Auntie Jean prepare it this way? And how did Grandma get that flavor? So trying to connect everything through food. Okay, and then making new core memories for my grandchildren. We are making chocolate chip pancakes. So I land in grandma jail kind of frequently because I do things that her parents or their parents don't necessarily approve of, like chocolate chip pancakes. But it is fun, and we do a lot of cooking. And she remembers. She's got a little apron that she puts on when I go, and we bond over food. So it's good. So that's kind of the why. And so my recipe collection started with a cookie, and if I can't quite see it right there, but when I was about 12 years old, I asked my aunt how she made a cookie, thinking that she would just make me a batch. But no, she didn't make me a batch. She wrote down the recipe and gave it to me. And to this day, we bake a lot of cookies. The table is that tablescape represents our Christmas cookies for 1 year, and we celebrate with cookies all the time. But yep, my recipe collection and that library of cookbooks started with a cookie for that my aunt made only at Christmas called a Swedish heirloom cookie. It's an almond-based cookie with a lot of powdered sugar. So that's why. What, and this is the name of the second cookbook, Playing in the Kitchen, because rarely do I take a recipe just sort of verbatim. But I play with it. And the picture that you see there is my interpretation of the cinnamon streusel coffee cake from King Arthur flour. I interpret it and I adapt them. And so it's hard to help someone recreate a recipe if they don't know everything that you've done to create the taste that they like. Because if I just said, go to King Arthur flour and get the cinnamon streusel coffee cake, it's not going to be the same. So we can go to the next slide. And then once, okay, so you have to understand what your why is. Why are you doing this? Are you doing it for memories? Are you doing it to capture recipes? Why are you doing this? Because if you start the project without a clear why, you're going to get into a muddle. And I think that it's harder to get out of that muddle, and you'll be frustrated by it. So why are you doing it? You're doing it for your grandchildren. So what's important for your grandchildren? You're doing it so that you can present it elsewhere. You're doing it for publication. Being clear on your why is really important. The what, again, is making sure that you know what you're going to put into that cookbook. So why you're doing it, what it is you're going to put into the cookbook, and then the how actually kind of flows. So I did this because I wanted my grandchildren to know who I was and why I created the food and where it came from. The what, I wanted not just recipes, but I wanted stories and pictures to go with that. And then the how. Choosing a program or template, and there are a lot of them out there. So it needs to fit your needs. So if it needs to be simple, whether or not you like to type, that because every single one of the words in these cookbooks was hand typed. Whether if you're including pictures, how many you need to scan, things like that. It's captioning the pictures. So finding a program or template that fits your need, your technical skill, because I am a dinosaur fast becoming a fossil when it comes to technology. And when I started this, I started it on an iPad, which I found out was not really compatible with a lot of different programs. So I moved back to a laptop. And then budgets. Some of these are relatively inexpensive. The one that I used, you could print a book for between $25 and $35, depending on the number of books you ordered. There are some online where it is a legacy, a true legacy product, and it's coffee table quality. That those can be $300 to $700. So making sure that you know your budget. Did somebody have a question? Okay. So understanding your budget is really important. So program template that fits your needs. And I really need to include here, that's actually number 4, setting enough time. I severely underestimated the length of time that I had to input. I was trying to get this done before my niece got married as a wedding gift to her. And I found myself really scrambling towards the end to make sure that I got everything in there that I wanted to have in there. Second thing is prioritizing and matching the recipes, the stories, and the photos. So you're not going to be able to include everything unless, again, your why is only grandma's recipes, right? I had cousins who wanted their family recipes in there. And I said, no, this is specific to the food my son ate when he was growing up. So you need to prioritize, the things that they're the gotta haves and then the sort of nice to haves, and then the ones that just you don't even want to include. But prioritize the recipes. And then match those to the stories that you want to tell and the pictures you want to include. This I found was the hardest part to all of it, was because I tried to include too many things and I ended up with a little bit of a muddle that I had to re-edit. Do have a technical expert available. Fortunately, my son was on call to answer questions about scanning pictures and things like that. The input. Typing can be a little tedious. Fortunately, again, it was my only marketable skill, so I can type. But it was important to have enough time to input. Some of these programs have a set limit of time. The one I used, you buy sort of a year's subscription for about $40. So that gives you a bit of a deadline just to begin with, but make sure you've got enough time. And for me, being in the right headspace was really important too. I didn't find any programs that allowed for a scan. So, I could have put in all of my mother-in-law's handwritten recipes, but it was not going to be the story I wanted to tell. Although I think now Heritage Cookbooks, the program that I used, will allow for a scan right now. Oh, proofread. I had to say proofread 3 times because it's so important. Um, I had to issue an errata page a few months ago on the first cookbook because, there were just things that were just flat out wrong. So if you are not a good proofreader, or you would prefer to have someone else even test the recipes, find a friend, a relative, or 2 or 3, or as many as you can find to help with this. And the last thing is have fun with it. It'll this whole process allowed me to relive a lot of great memories and to write things in a voice that my grandchildren would understand, and just have fun. I reconnected with family about, your mom used to make X. And okay, I think I saw some questions in the chat.
Yeah, it's a question from Lisa. How did you decide what order to put the recipes in?
Well, because I am a cookbook junkie, I decided that I would put it in the recipes in standard cookbook order, right? In standard cookbook categories. So appetizers, um, cookies, desserts, main courses, sauces, sides, soups, whatever it is that makes the most logical sense to you, because you're the one that's going to be using it. Think about your audience. Who's going to be using it? Where would they look for it? Some of these programs have built-in indices, and some do not. So an index was important to me because the first cookbook had 5 distinct sections, and my son might not always know, as between my husband's maternal and paternal grandparents, where it came from. So make sure that there's a good index as well.
Susan asked, what should you do with old handwritten recipes to preserve them?
So the Heritage Cookbook, I was able to take a picture of the old handwritten one and include that in the cookbook itself with a notes page attached to it as to how I've adapted it, and what my mother-in-law did differently than what I do today. If you want to just keep the sort of archive, the handwritten recipe, and that's really harder, because I do have some old handwritten recipes from my husband's grandmother, and we have found that putting those into sort of an archival quality plastic slip sheet is really the only way to do that. You can't just tape them into a book. They've got to be preserved in a slip sheet of some sort. So, did that answer the question?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
And feel free to come off mute if you want to ask a question too. But happy to relay the questions as well. I think we have, yeah, okay, so that was the end of the slide.